When most of us think about the relationship between our minds and the world around us, we tend to fall back on this very specific, like deeply ingrained metaphor. We basically imagine life as a cosmic vending machine.
Yes, the vending machine.
Right, you stand in front of it, you punch in the right buttons, maybe a positive affirmation here, a strongly held visualization there, and you just expect the machine to mechanically drop exactly what you asked for right into the tray.
Right. It's the ultimate transactional view of existence.
Totally.
The underlying assumption there is that there's this strict linear exchange rate. Like
Mhm.
you insert a specific thought and you extract a corresponding physical reality.
And honestly, I mean, it is an incredibly comforting fantasy. We desperately want to believe that if we just think hard enough about, a promotion or a perfect relationship or just financial stability, the universe's vending machine is going to eventually dispense it.
Yeah, of course we do.
But when you actually start pulling apart the mechanics of human consciousness, how our biology, our psychology, and our physical environment actually
Right.
interact.
It completely falls apart.
Exactly. That vending machine metaphor just shatters completely. We are
Right.
not looking at a linear machine. We're looking at a system that is infinitely complex, highly responsive, and frankly, far more demanding because it requires active participation, not just passive wishing.
Right. Moving away from that vending machine idea is a total paradigm shift. It really forces a transition from being a consumer of reality to recognizing yourself as a deeply entangled participant within a living system.
Which brings us to the mission for this deep dive. So welcome back. If you are joining us today, we are picking up right where we left off. We are embarking on part 2 of our exploration into that ancient, heavily debated statement. As you believe, so shall it be done unto you.
A really big one to tackle.
Huge. And in part 1, we lay down the foundational concepts. We looked at the basics of how belief shapes perception. We explored the inherent neutrality of the universe. And we mapped out those unavoidable laws of cause and effect.
Right.
So today, we are taking those raw materials and we're building an entirely new framework.
And I've got to say, a new framework is just desperately needed here because the traditional interpretations of that quote, the ones that lean really heavily on that cosmic vending machine idea, they've led millions of people down a very frustrating, often guilt-ridden path of, magical thinking.
Yeah, magical thinking is exactly what it is. And the sources we are unpacking today, which include this deeply detailed text and a massively comprehensive infographic, they are designed to dismantle that magical thinking completely.
Piece by piece.
Right. The core thesis here is a total rejection of the idea that this ancient quote refers to some supernatural being or like a cosmic genie granting wishes based on your thoughts. We are completely throwing out the vending machine. And to do that, I have my favorite co-pilot here to guide us through the psychology, the neuroscience, and the systems theory of it all.
Thank you. And what's fascinating here is the stark contrast our sources draw right out of the gate. It really sets the tone for everything we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, it sets up 2 different paradigms.
Exactly. They present 2 profoundly different operating systems for life. So the first is that flawed, popularized notion, reality gives me whatever I think about.
Right, the vending machine.
Yep. But the second one, however, outlines an actual mechanism. And that one is, the state of my consciousness changes how I participate in reality, which changes the causes I create, which changes the effects I experience.
And I want to just pause there because the difference between those 2 statements, it isn't just semantic. It's a completely different physics of living.
It really is.
And that is our roadmap for you today. We are going to explore a quantum analogy to understand how our minds filter possibility. We are going to walk step by step through a fascinating 12-stage recursive cycle of cause and effect.
That 12-step cycle is incredible.
It really is. And then we're going to dissect the spiritual buzzword frequency and figure out what it actually means mechanically, like in your nervous system. And ultimately, we are going to look into the experiential mirror of life itself.
I love that roadmap.
But to kick this off, we have to establish the nature of the reality we are actually participating in. So to understand how consciousness changes our participation, the source text starts at the microscopic level with a quantum analogy.
Right. And I have to say, bringing quantum physics into a discussion about consciousness is generally a recipe for pseudoscience.
Oh, absolutely.
But the text handles this with a very specific, deliberate boundary, which I appreciated.
Okay, let's unpack this and test that boundary immediately, because I know alarm bells are ringing for anyone with a background in physics listening to us right now. The source explains that at subatomic scales, reality does not behave according to the solid deterministic rules that our everyday senses rely on. Instead, quantum systems exist as probability waves, like ranges of possible outcomes, and it isn't until a measurement or an observation is made that a definite result is produced.
Right, so the classic double-slit experiment is the famous example of this. Before the measurement, the electron basically acts as a wave of potential existing in multiple possible states simultaneously.
Right.
But the act of measurement collapses that wave of potential into a localized, definite particle. A what if becomes a this is.
But, and I want to push back here on behalf of our listeners, if I'm sitting on my couch looking at my empty coffee table, I can't just measure $1,000,000 into existence.
No.
You cannot. The pop culture interpretation always takes that subatomic behavior and scales it way up to say, human observation literally creates physical matter out of thin air.
Yeah, that's the jump people make.
But our sources explicitly state, this does not scientifically prove that human thoughts collapse the everyday physical universe around us. We absolutely cannot use quantum mechanics to justify why a briefcase of cash should just materialize, because we visualized it.
Exactly. I applaud that distinction. Because the source material is using quantum physics strictly as a fascinating analogy for psychological possibility, not as a literal map for macro reality.
Okay.
It is providing a conceptual framework for how human consciousness interfaces with an environment of infinite variables.
So how does that analogy actually apply to a human being waking up on a Tuesday morning?
Yeah.
Because if we aren't collapsing physical wave functions into briefcases of cash, what is consciousness actually doing?
Well, think about the sheer volume of data, the potential interactions, and the diverging pathways that exist in just a single day. At the human level, life constantly presents a sea of overlapping possibilities.
Right. There's always a million things going on.
Exactly. You could take a different route to work. You could interpret a text message as an insult or a joke. You could speak up in a meeting or just stay silent. In the face of all that infinite potential, consciousness does something structurally similar to that quantum measurement. It selects.
Okay. It selects, but it doesn't necessarily create the raw materials from scratch.
Yeah.
It's more like walking into a massive grocery store. The store already contains tens of thousands of items. My consciousness dictates what goes into my cart. I am collapsing the probability of my dinner down to a specific meal, not by magic, but by selective focus.
That's a great way to put it. It acts as a filter and a director. The universe provides the raw probability, your consciousness provides the selection mechanism, and that selection process dictates your trajectory through the physical world.
Which naturally forces us to ask, how does that selection process actually work under the hood? I mean, it clearly isn't just me saying out loud, I choose to be happy today, and then my brain magically complies.
Right, if only it were that easy.
Exactly. The text provides this remarkably rigorous 12-step cycle for how this selection plays out mechanically. And I want to spend serious time walking through this cycle, because once you see it let out, you will recognize every single argument, every single success, and every single failure you've ever had mapped perfectly to this flow.
Oh, absolutely. It is a brilliant breakdown of human systems. And it starts with the environment itself. Step 1 is simply possibility. The infographic describes this as everything is happening.
Let's put a scale on everything for a second. At any given millisecond, your eyes are taking in millions of bits of visual data. Your ears are processing overlapping sound waves. The temperature in the room is fluctuating. Thousands of people in your city are making decisions that might indirectly affect you.
It's overwhelming.
The sheer bandwidth of reality is staggering.
And you, as a biological organism, would go completely insane if you had to process even 1% of it consciously, which introduces the first massive biological bottleneck. Step 2, attention.
Okay, so attention is the filter. But how does the filter know what to let through out of all that noise?
So neurologically, we are talking about the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The RAS, right?
Yeah. It is this bundle of nerves at our brainstem that acts as a bouncer for your conscious mind. It filters out the noise and only lets through data that matches your internal parameters of what is considered important.
So to use a classic example, if I buy a red car, suddenly I see red cars everywhere on the highway.
Mm-hmm.
The cars didn't magically materialize out of the quantum field. My RAS simply changed its filtering parameters. My attention selected a different slice of possibility.
Oh, exactly.
But what sets those parameters in daily life? I mean, it's our conditioning, our survival instincts, our fears, right? Like, If you are anxious about your job security, your RAS is highly tuned to detect any micro-expression of dissatisfaction on your boss's face.
Spot on. Your attention selects the raw data, but raw data is useless without context, which moves us to step 3. Perception. The text defines this as what you notice, but perception is deeply active. Your brain takes the scattered data points your attention let through and stitches them together into a coherent picture.
So it's not a camera taking a photo, it's a projector displaying a constructed image.
Yes.
Meaning, two people can look at the exact same physical event, say a manager looking at their watch during a presentation. One person's attention captures it, and their perception builds an image of an impatient, angry boss. The other person's attention captures it, and their perception builds an image of a busy person just checking the time.
Right, because perception immediately demands step 4, meaning this is where the raw data is interpreted, what it means to you. The universe does not attach semantic labels to physical events.
That's such a huge point.
A manager looking at a watch is just a biological entity rotating its wrist. That's all it is. The meaning is entirely overlaid by the observer.
And meaning is the pivot point for everything that follows, isn't it? If the meaning you assign to the watch check is, my presentation is boring and I'm going to get fired, that is a completely different biological reality than assigning the meaning, he has a hard stop at 2 p.m.
Completely different.
But why do we default to the catastrophic meaning so often? It feels like human nature.
Well, because the brain is a prediction machine designed for survival, not for happiness.
Wow, okay.
It references your entire database of past experiences, traumas, and beliefs. If you have unresolved insecurities about your competence, the brain will assign a threat-based meaning to ambiguous data, just to be safe. It is always better, from an evolutionary standpoint, to mistake a stick for a snake than a snake for a stick.
Right, but mistaking sticks for snakes in a corporate office has massive consequences. Because the moment you assign that threat-based meaning, you trigger step 5. Thought, what you think about, the narrative loop kicks in.
Oh yeah, the internal monologue begins spinning rapidly. I shouldn't have included that slide. I knew I wasn't ready for this. Everyone in the room thinks I'm a total fraud.
And thought is not sterile. You cannot run a catastrophic thought loop without your biology getting involved. Which brings us to step 6. Feeling, what you feel. And the text is great here. We need to define feeling physically, not just poetically.
Right. A feeling is a chemical payload released into your bloodstream. When you think a threatening thought, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, it sounds the siren. Your endocrine system floods with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate accelerates to pump blood to your extremities. Your digestive system shuts down.
You are literally preparing to fight a tiger, but you are just standing in a conference room holding a clicker.
Exactly. And this fleeting chemical rush culminates in step 7, state. The text is very careful to specify this as your inner and physical state. A feeling is a wave. A state is the ocean you are swimming in.
Right. You have locked into a physiological baseline. Your nervous system is now operating from a sympathetic fight-or-flight dominance. Your peripheral vision literally narrows. Your access to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for creative problem-solving, is severely restricted because blood flow has been diverted to survival mechanisms.
Well, just wild when you think about it.
Think about the tragedy of this. The universe offered infinite possibility. Your attention filtered for a watch check. You assigned the meaning of failure, thought about being fired, released stress hormones, and now you are physically locked into a state of panic. And we haven't even interacted with the outside world yet.
Not even a little bit.
But this internal lockdown inevitably spills outward, which is step 8, behavior, what you do.
Because operating from a state of physiological threat, your behavior fundamentally changes. Your posture shrinks, your vocal cords tighten, changing the pitch and resonance of your voice. You might start rushing through the slides, speaking defensively, or avoiding eye contact.
Which guarantees step 9, interaction, how you engage. You are now interacting with the room not as a confident expert, but as a cornered animal. If someone asks a completely innocent question about a slide, you snap back with a defensive answer.
And humans are deeply, deeply sensitive to the states of other humans. The people in the room possess mirror neurons. Their nervous systems detect your hostility, your anxiety, and your defensiveness. They unconsciously match your state. The room gets tense.
Which brings the hammer down on step 10, consequence. What results?
Yeah.
Because you came off as defensive and rushed, the presentation falls flat. The manager, who originally just checked his watch because he had a flight to catch, is now irritated by your aggressive tone. The proposal is rejected.
And here is where the cycle reveals its recursive nature. That rejection becomes step 11. Feedback, new information. You take the objective consequence, a failed presentation, and you feed it back into your internal database.
Right. You walk out of the room, and your brain says, see, I knew the presentation was terrible. I knew they hated me.
Which brings us to the final step. Step 12, new possibility. The text notes, the cycle begins again. But it begins again from a newly altered baseline. You have reinforced the neural pathways of insecurity.
It is an echo chamber.
Yeah.
But I want to be clear, not an algorithmic echo chamber on social media. It is an echo chamber of our own biological and psychological design. We aren't standing on the edge of a canyon shouting into the void and waiting to see what the universe bounces back at us.
No.
We are inside the chamber. We are generating the shout. But that shout is actively rearranging the rock walls around us, which changes the acoustics for the next time we open our mouths. We are continuously building the geometry of our own feedback loop.
I love that analogy. The geometry of the feedback loop is the perfect way to visualize it, because by engaging in that cycle, you actively narrow the field of future possibilities.
Right?
The next time you walk into a meeting, your reticular activating system will be even more hyper-focused on detecting threats. Your perception will be more skewed, your meaning-making more negative. You are participating in the creation of the very conditions you are suffering from.
And this 12-step cycle isn't a rare event. That's what's so crazy. It is running constantly. It is running while you wash the dishes, while you drive in traffic, while you navigate your marriage. It is the invisible engine of your lived experience.
Always running. And the fuel for that engine, the baseline parameter that dictates how the RAS filters data and how perception assigns meaning, is belief.
Okay, yes. Let's talk about belief.
This brings us to a major paradigm shift in the source material, because it completely redefines what a belief actually is.
Right, because in pop culture, a belief is treated as a passive possession. It's like an intellectual artifact sitting on a shelf in your mind. You have a belief about money, you have a belief about relationships.
And the text rejects that passive definition entirely. Belief is not something you have. It is the active instrument through which reality is perceived. It is the lens of the telescope you are looking through.
If the lens is curved, the entire universe appears curved. If the lens is tinted red, every star looks red. The text illustrates this vividly by setting up a scenario. Two people experiencing the exact same external event, but processing it through different states of consciousness. It's what the infographic maps out as the state of lack versus the state of awareness.
This comparison is where the mechanics of the 12-step cycle really become undeniable. Let's ground this with a specific example. Let's say these two people both launch a new business, and within the first year, a major investor pulls out, the market shifts, and the business goes completely bankrupt. They both lose their life savings.
Total disaster.
Right. The external event, the cessation of the business, and the loss of capital is identical. The universe delivered the exact same data to both people.
But let's look at how the state of lack processes that data. When the person operating from lack looks at the bankruptcy, the infographic lists 5 specific things they see. They see rejection. They see failure. They see an enemy. Maybe they blame the investor, the economy, or themselves.
Yep.
They see punishment. Like, why does the universe always do this to me? And finally, they see chaos.
Now, run that perception through the 12-step cycle we just discussed. If the assigned meaning is rejection, enemy, and punishment, the feeling is profound victimization, bitterness, and anger. The physiological state is chronic stress. What does the behavior become?
It becomes withdrawal, lashing out, numbing behaviors, complete paralysis.
Exactly. And as the infographic perfectly concludes for this column, the next causes become limited, reactive, defensive. You have built a fortress. And the tragic irony of a fortress is that while it keeps threats out, it also keeps you locked inside. The universe can now only interact with you as a person hiding behind a wall.
But if we look at the second person, whose business also collapsed, but they are operating from the state of awareness column, it is a completely different reality. The infographic says they look at the exact same bankruptcy, and they don't see rejection, they see redirection.
Which changes everything. They don't see failure, they see information, they don't see an enemy, they see a human being, the investor, acting out of their own economic conditioning and fear.
Right. They don't see cosmic punishment. They see simple cause and effect. Like, I miscalculated the market demand, therefore the product didn't sell. And instead of chaos, they see the hidden lesson. Redirection, information, human conditioning, cause and effect, the hidden lesson.
The bank still foreclosed on the property.
Right.
The money is still gone. The physical reality of the bankruptcy is not denied, but the instrument of perception transformed the psychological data.
And because the data was transformed, The rest of the cycle produces a radically different trajectory. The meaning assigned isn't "I am a victim," it's "my hypothesis was incorrect, I need to adjust."
Yeah.
The feeling might involve grief or disappointment, sure, but it doesn't devolve into despair. The behavior becomes analytical.
Yeah.
You review the spreadsheets, you interview the customers who didn't buy, you update your skills.
And the infographic's conclusion for the state of awareness is the next causes become constructive, creative, expansive. The radical divergence in their life trajectories over the next 5 years will be astronomical.
Oh, absolutely.
And it didn't happen because the universe favored one and cursed the other. It happened purely because perception changed the very next cause in the chain.
This obliterates the vending machine metaphor. The vending machine didn't drop a failure to one and a success to the other. Reality handed them a perfectly neutral event, the end of a business. It was their internal state of consciousness that actively converted that neutral event into either a cage or a classroom.
It is entirely an inside-out process, but we have to be careful not to keep this process quarantined in the realm of abstract philosophy. The source text bridges the gap between the internal mind and the external physical reality in a way that demands our attention. It delves into the biology of belief.
This is where we leave the realm of self-help and enter hard physiological science. The text points out that thoughts and emotions are not ethereal ghosts haunting the machine of your body. They are physical events.
Very physical.
Right? When you shift from a state of lack to a state of awareness, you aren't just changing a philosophy, you are altering electrical activity in the brain, neurochemistry, cellular metabolism, and the tone of your autonomic nervous system.
The internal biological environment changes, but here is the critical leap the text makes. What occurs internally does not remain imprisoned beneath your skin. It leaks out into the environment.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The infographic provides a fascinating list of the subtle channels through which your inner world broadcasts outward. It states your inner state is physically expressed through your voice, your posture, your facial expressions, your decisions, your patience, your reactions, your courage, your avoidance, your persistence, and your relationships.
Let's break down how loud that broadcast actually is, because research in nonverbal communication shows that human beings are constantly transmitting massive amounts of data.
Unconsciously, most of the time.
Right. A micro-expression of contempt on your face flashes for a fraction of a second. A slight slouch of the shoulders indicates defeat. The cadence and pitch of your voice change measurably when you are stressed versus when you are relaxed.
And you probably don't even notice you're doing it. When I'm stressed, I have no idea that my jaw is tight or my breathing is shallow. But other nervous systems notice it instantly.
They absolutely do.
Let's use another example. Let's say you walk into a coffee shop and your internal state is churning with anxiety from an argument you had at home. Your physical broadcast is broadcasting threat. You aren't making eye contact, your movements are sharp, you aggressively slap your credit card on the counter.
The barista is another biological organism equipped with an incredibly sensitive threat detection system.
Yeah.
Their amygdala processes your facial tension, your sharp movements, and your tone of voice in milliseconds, long before their conscious mind realizes what's happening.
Right.
Their nervous system detects hostility.
And their system reacts to protect itself. The barista might become short with you. They might get flustered and mess up your order. They might just give you a cold, defensive look.
And how do you respond? Your brain, already primed for threat, takes the barista's coldness as validation. You think, wow, everyone in this town is so incredibly rude.
But you seeded the cloud. The rain fell on you, but you brought the humidity into the room. The causal chain is unbroken here. The internal psychology became external physiology through posture and tone. The external world reacted to that physical data, and that reaction returned as new feedback to your internal world, cementing your original state of frustration.
We are constantly exuding our state of consciousness into the physical environment, and the environment, largely composed of other highly reactive human nervous systems, is constantly reflecting it back to us.
So if our internal world is constantly leaking out through behavior, and the external world is constantly reacting and pouring back into us through perception, it raises a really mind-bending question. Where's the actual boundary? Where do I end, and where does the universe begin?
This is where the source material requires us to navigate a very fine line between established science, philosophical inquiry, and spiritual exploration. The text is intellectually honest. It states plainly that science has not established that thoughts emit a specific metaphysical frequency that acts like a tractor beam pulling physical objects towards you. The popularized law of attraction, The idea that your brain waves magnetically pull Ferraris and mansions across space and time is a metaphysical proposition, not a scientific consensus.
So we aren't magnets. But the text also says that a lack of scientific demonstration regarding literal magnetic thoughts doesn't close the door on the deeper philosophical question. We don't need a peer-reviewed paper to ask fundamental questions about the nature of existence.
And the question the text asks is profound. What if consciousness, energy, information, and matter are not ultimately isolated, separate realities? What if they are different densities or expressions of one underlying unified creation?
If they are expressions of one system, then the boundary between the individual and creation is an illusion. We walk around perceiving ourselves as these isolated meat suits, walking on the earth, interacting with the universe. Like, my skin is the boundary. Everything inside is me. Everything outside is not me.
The illusion of the ego's boundary. From a systems thinking perspective, it makes no sense. You are continuously exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide with the atmosphere. You are digesting the physical matter of the earth. You are absorbing photons from the sun. You are entirely permeable.
So if consciousness is just a localized expression existing within this unified creation, the entire model of how we interact with reality flips upside down. We aren't standing outside the universe pounding on the door asking it to give us things. We're the localized expressions already inside the causal system we're trying to influence.
Think of a white blood cell within a human body. The cell has a specific localized function, a specific environment it interacts with. But it is not separate from the body. It doesn't ask the body to respond to it. Its very actions are the biological processes of the body. You are already inside the machinery of cause and effect.
But if I am inside the system, right, a cell in the body of creation, and my consciousness is constantly introducing causes, does the system judge those causes? Like if I have a terrible day, I get angry, I yell at my spouse, I cut someone off in traffic, I have generated a lot of negative causes. Is there a cosmic ledger keeping track? Does the body decide I am a bad cell?
This brings us to what might be the most liberating concept in the entire source text, the principle of absolute neutrality. The text firmly asserts that creation does not need to judge.
And I love how the infographic illustrates this. It uses these two brilliant, simple icons. It shows a little gift box with the text, "Not reward." That was a positive thought, so I will reward you. And right next to it, a gavel with the text, "Not punishment." That was a negative thought, so I will punish you. It completely rejects the human projection of a moralistic judging universe.
Because we project our psychology onto the cosmos. Humans judge, hold grudges, and seek retribution, so we assume the universe must do the same thing. But the text states it powerfully. Creation is neutral. Cause simply produces effect. Fire burns because of oxidation, not because it hates the wood. Gravity pulls because of mass, not because it wants to punish the person fallen.
Right. It is physics, applied to the realm of consciousness and behavior.
Exactly. The quality of your consciousness dictates the quality of the causes you introduce into the system. Those causes interact with billions of other causes. Effects naturally emerge. Those effects become your physical experiences. The experience provides you with feedback. If you are paying attention, you gain understanding, and your consciousness evolves.
It's mechanical.
It is a pure, unjudging mechanical cycle. Consciousness to cause to experience, to feedback, to understanding, to evolution.
Let's apply this because I think this is crucial. When something terrible happens, it is not the universe sitting on a throne saying, "You vibrated at a low frequency of anger last week, so I'm punishing you with a flat tire on your way to a job interview."
Oh, that's the worst.
It is. That is a toxic, deeply narcissistic mentality that unfortunately saturates a lot of modern spiritual communities.
Yeah.
The universe isn't holding a gavel. Your flat tire is the result of a sharp object interacting with rubber on a physical road.
And your reaction to that flat tire, whether you descend into a state of lack and scream at the sky, or shift into a state of awareness and calmly change the tire, is the new cause you are introducing into the neutral system.
Which transitions us perfectly to a word you just used, and a concept the source material tackles head on. It is a word I honestly cringe at sometimes because it has been so abused. Frequency.
Yeah. It has completely saturated the self-help and spiritual spaces. You hear it everywhere. You need to raise your frequency. I'm just not vibing at that frequency. High-frequency people.
If someone tells me to raise my frequency one more time, I might lose my mind. Let's look at this rigorously. Because if we are using the word frequency, literally, we are making a measurable scientific claim. Frequency is a measurement of cycles per second hertz. It applies to sound waves, radio waves, light waves.
Right. The human body emits electromagnetic frequencies, heart rhythms, brain waves. But your thoughts don't have a tunable radio dial that beams out a specific 432 hertz signal to the cosmos to order a new pair of shoes.
If you tell me to raise my physical frequency, my atoms would literally heat up and I burst into flames.
Exactly.
So if it's not a literal radio wave, what are people actually talking about when they say this? The text does a brilliant job of translating the metaphor. It strips the mysticism away and says frequency is simply a shorthand for the organization and quality of consciousness.
It grounds a floating, ethereal concept into incredibly practical psychological and behavioral elements. The text actually lists what comprises this frequency, and it has nothing to do with vibrations.
Let's run through that list. It's essentially a diagnostic manual for your life. It says your frequency is comprised of your dominant thoughts. Are your thought loops generally optimistic or are they cynical?
Your emotional regulation. When a crisis hits, does your nervous system completely redline into panic, or can you find your center and breathe?
Your expectations. When you meet a stranger, do you expect betrayal or do you expect basic human decency?
The list continues. Your awareness. How much of that 12-step cycle are you actually conscious of in real time, or are you just a passenger to your reactions?
Your intentions. Are you acting from a place of service and connection, or are you operating from fear, manipulation, and self-protection?
Your understanding and wisdom. How deeply do you comprehend the long-term consequences of your actions?
And finally, your choices and your actions. This is the crucial bridge. The text says your frequency is the causes you repeatedly create.
When you look at that list thoughts, emotional regulation, expectations, awareness, intentions, choices, raising your frequency isn't about meditating on a crystal until you feel a buzzing sensation. It's about doing the hard, granular, psychological work of organizing your consciousness.
Yes. Under this definition, raising your frequency isn't magical thinking at all. It simply means changing the state from which you participate in life. If you go to therapy and improve your emotional regulation, you have literally raised your frequency because you have changed the quality of the causes you introduce into the system. When you are regulated, you don't yell at the barista. You don't send the passive-aggressive email. You listen to your partner instead of talking over them.
The logic is airtight. When the participant changes, the participation changes. When the participation changes, the causes change. And when the causes change, the future possibilities change. It demystifies the entire concept while actually making it far more powerful because it places the locus of control firmly back in your hands.
If we accept this framework, if we accept that the universe isn't a cosmic magnet rewarding or punishing us, and that our frequency is just our active participation in a neutral cycle of cause and effect,
Yeah.
it forces a complete reevaluation of how we view the events in our lives.
It forces an evolution in the fundamental question we are asking in reality.
The text calls this out explicitly. The old question, the ego-driven question we all naturally start with, the vending machine question is, how can I make reality give me what I want?
It's a question based entirely on control, extraction, and manipulation. It assumes the universe is a resource to be plundered for personal comfort.
But the evolved question, the one the source material asks us to adopt, is so much deeper. The evolved question is, what is this experience revealing to consciousness about itself?
Stop for a second and think about what happens when you substitute the old question for the new one. If you start trying to force reality to comply with your demands and instead start treating reality as a revelation, every single event becomes a source of profound information.
Let's use this new question to reframe some common life experiences, just like the text does. Let's say you hit a period of intense, grinding difficulty at work. Under the old question, you ask, why is this happening to me? How can I manifest this away? Under the evolved question, you ask, what is this revealing? The difficulty stops being a punishment and becomes information.
Right. It might be revealing that you have terrible boundaries and say yes to too much work. It might be revealing that you are in a career that violates your core values.
And what about relationships? Under the old question, a difficult partner or friend is an obstacle to be fixed or removed. Under the evolved question, relationships become the ultimate mirrors. They reflect back to you your own insecurities, your own communication deficits, your own unresolved childhood dynamics.
Triggers. Think about triggers. When someone says something casual that makes your blood boil, the old response is to attack them for making you angry. The new response is to see the physiological trigger as an opportunity for internal observation. Wow, why did that specific sentence cause a cortisol spike in my body? What deeply held belief about my own worth was just threatened by their comment?
Consequences become teachers. Success becomes information. It tells you what aligns with the systemic flow. Failure becomes information. It tells you where your understanding of the system was flawed.
Even suffering, and I want to tread carefully here because this is the hardest one, but the text suggests that even suffering can become information from which greater understanding and compassion may eventually emerge.
The source material uses a very powerful analogy to summarize this shift. It says, life stops being merely a collection of random things happening to you. It becomes an experiential mirror.
An enormous experiential mirror through which consciousness continually encounters itself. That is a beautiful, almost haunting image.
It is profound. But I see a massive trap here.
Yes, the victim-blaming trap.
Exactly. If you are listening right now and your mind is going to the darkest possible place, if you are wondering, wait, did my pessimistic phase cause my car accident? Did my low frequency manifest a natural disaster? We need to stop and clarify this immediately. Because people hear, life is a mirror, or as you believe, so shall it be done unto you, and they apply it backward to every tragedy they've ever endured.
It is a horrific misapplication of the principle, and the sources draw a hard line against it.
Let's be crystal clear. This framework does not mean you personally, consciously, or unconsciously created every bad thing that has ever happened to you. Remember the very first step in the 12-step cycle, possibility. You do not control the possibility step. The universe is a vast, infinitely complex web of billions of intersecting causes and effects, most of which have absolutely nothing to do with your localized consciousness. Natural disasters, biological mutations, and crucially, the free will and actions of other people. These are part of the neutral environment of creation.
You are a localized participant in a massive macro system. You are a cell in the body. You are not the entire body. The mirror of life is not reflecting only your isolated thoughts. It is reflecting the totality of the causal web.
Your locus of control, your actual power, exists in the next steps of the cycle. It exists in how your consciousness interacts with the external event, how your perception interprets it, the meaning you assign to it, and what you learn from the feedback. You didn't create the hurricane. But your state of consciousness determines whether you perceive the destruction as a cosmic punishment that ruins you, or as a devastating but neutral physical event that requires you to rebuild, adapt, and help your neighbors.
That is the vital distinction. You are responsible for the quality of your participation, not for dictating the entire environment. The mirror shows you how you are choosing to participate.
So what does this all mean? Let's pull all of this together. We've dismantled the illusion of the cosmic vending machine. We've walked through the quantum analogy of filtering possibility. We've tracked the relentless 12-step loop of cause and effect. We've redefined frequency as the practical organization of your psychology. And we have looked into the experiential mirror without falling into the trap of victim blaming. It is time to return to the title of the text, that ancient statement. As you believe, so shall it be done unto you.
After tearing it down and rebuilding it, that quote carries an entirely different, much heavier weight.
It's no longer a magical incantation. It's a statement of systemic mechanics.
If we synthesize everything we've discussed today, we find that the quote is profoundly true. But it is true for entirely mechanical, psychological, and physiological reasons. It is not true because the physical matter of the universe magically rearranges itself to accommodate a passing thought.
It's true because belief is the first domino in a very real, very physical chain reaction.
The final infographic lays out this chain in a way that you cannot unsee once you understand it. It is true because what you believe dictates how your reticular activating system filters data. How you filter data influences how you perceive the world. How you perceive the world dictates the meaning you assign. The meaning generates your thoughts. Your thoughts trigger your neurochemistry, which creates your feelings. Your feelings lock in your physiological state.
And your state dictates your behavior. The words you say, the tone of your voice, the microexpressions on your face, that behavior determines how you interact with other human beings. Those interactions introduce new causes into the physical world. Those causes produce real, objective consequences. Those consequences become your lived experience.
And that lived experience returns to your senses as new feedback, at which point your consciousness must decide what to believe all over again. It is a flawless, inescapable loop of creation, participation, and feedback.
The text states, "You are not standing outside creation asking it to respond to you. You are an expression within creation, participating in the very chain of cause and effect that you experience." That might be the most important sentence in this entire exploration.
It is the ultimate shift. It moves us from a mindset of separation and control to a mindset of integration and awareness.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. Something to mull over as you close this out and walk into the rest of your day, interacting with the people and the challenges around you. We've talked extensively about life as an experiential mirror, showing consciousness its own reflection. And the text suggests that our deepest purpose isn't learning how to manipulate the mirror to get what we want, but simply becoming conscious enough to understand what the mirror is showing us.
And that alone is a profound life's purpose.
But let's take it one step further, building on the systems thinking we just explored. If you are not separate from creation, if you are a localized expression of it, like a cell in the body, then the mirror isn't just a static piece of glass hanging on a wall.
No, it is a living system.
It's alive. And perhaps, as you learn from the mirror itself evolves. By becoming self-aware, by doing the hard, granular work of organizing your consciousness, regulating your emotions, and shifting from a state of lack to a state of awareness, you aren't just improving your own localized life. You are a piece of the universe, which means your self-awareness is literally the universe waking up.
Wow.
When you look in the mirror and finally understand the causal web you are looking at, it is creation learning how to see itself clearly for the very first time. You aren't just living in the universe. You are the universe, learning how to exist.
That implication changes everything. It means every single interaction you have, every single moment of perception, every tiny shift in meaning carries incredible significance.
It does. It means none of it is wasted. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take that evolved question, what is this experience revealing? And carry it with you into the chaotic, beautiful sea of possibility today. We'll see you next time.